Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Call meeting to order at 7:43. The roll call, we'll start with you, Brent, please.
Wait, Ryanwood, and Young,
Goes with at 11. Dean Gould,
Sid Legend,
David Morse,
Aaron Barber.
and yes, yeah, we designate Dwight as an alternative. But, now will be the pledge of allegiance. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Much to say other than that, and we'll try to get this meeting going and get through it. Any citizens' comments on anything that we're not discussing tonight? Hearing none, we can move on to the meeting minutes that we just amended. I've got the information for the closing.
So that the motions for exiting executive session and adjourning the meeting will be added in the amended section.
Yeah.
Complete the minutes.
Because we had this communication, I didn't get that information. So. Everybody has a minute. So we'll look over that.
The agenda said April 17th, these minutes are April 29th.
That's the inland water.
Oh,
that's different.
Sorry, Amy.
Like, what did I do that for? I didn't even say this, that was that.
I might hand it out the wrong ones. Yeah, you have the minutes for this,
Yeah, I know. They were emailed out, I know that.
Yeah, online.
oh, here they are. Quickly, get some. Just compile. No, that's the amended agenda. We don't have minutes in front of us. So. This is the amended agenda, which has the executive session on it, so. We will pass on the minutes till next time.
Your motion to the table.
I'll make a motion.
Second. All in favor? Okay, new business. I think that moves us to you, Daniel, without POCD, I think. Or is that, do we have any other new business other than POCD?
POCD is number 7.
Yeah, I know, but it said so new business other than,
I don't know of any.
and I don't have any old business in front of me. That brings us to the POCD. We have the minutes from the wetlands meeting. From us. And Delia handed out that for a memo there.
Did you get that by email? I thought I emailed it out.
I was looking for it. I didn't.
Anyway, I took the state statute on the POCD and reformatted it because what drives me crazy is they have endless paragraphs with lists of numbers and it makes it hard for me to follow the list. It's gonna get buried in the paragraph. So I broke it out so you can see basically what the lists are. These are the topics that shall be in the POCD, and then there's another list of things that may be in the POCD. So there are things we have yet to cover. So I need your input on them. And I have also sent the same document to the PZC committee, and I'm waiting for their input as well. The other handouts I handed out today would be the document that talks about a community development action plan. That's something that the state statute says that your POCD can have. So here's a little description of what they can be. And I thought I'd sent this to you by email, so I apologize, but if we could go through the list and we could talk about it, and then if you have any further thoughts on the topic, you can always email me.
Which list are you looking at?
The one that has the yellow
Yellow.
side.
Yep.
The bottom of page 1 says in preparing such plan, the commission or special committee shall consider the following. It doesn't mean you have to put those things in, but you have to consider them. So we have the affordable housing plan, and I will be including information on housing in the POCD. So unless there's something new, we could move on to number 3. I'm sorry, number 1 would be the community development action plan. So tonight's the first time you're seeing this list. You can read it, and then we can talk about it at the next meeting, or you can send me some information, your comments by email, and then I can put it all together and then share it out to the commission for discussion at the next meeting. So I know it might feel like you're being put on the spot, because if you haven't seen this before, but we can have more discussion about it, and like I said, you can email me. So if we wanted to move on to number 3, that doesn't mean we're skipping over number 1, but after you've had a chance to read this, then we can talk about it further.
Under that affordable housing, I think we're waiting on the senior housing survey. Or, some of that.
Their survey results would be very helpful overall. I'm not sure when they're gonna have the results available, but I'm sure it'll be helpful for many different areas of the POCD. But
That survey was open until June, and they hope to have the results processed by the end of August.
so, depending on who's gonna finish up the POCD, it could either be drafted that the commission would look for that, or if you haven't finished it by then, the results can be added in wherever it's applicable, and then you could do your whole process where you have your public hearings on the draft POCD. So number 3 is the need for protection of existing and potential public surface and ground drinking water supplies. There was a lot of discussion at the wetlands meeting that I attended a couple days ago about the topic of water quality. And so they've given me a lot of input and some actual text they would like to include. So if there's anything you guys would like to add, we can go over that now, or you can think about it and bring it to me again.
Yeah, do we have an inventory in town of showing the brownfields and the hazardous sites that are in town?
I don't know that, but I'm sure we can get one from DEP.
I think that'd be very helpful. Especially it would show where we can't develop until it's cleaned up. So if there's a problem behind the elementary school, if there's a problem at Line Master, if there's a problem with the salt sheds out there in West Woodstock, those should be shown.
Okay. There's been discussion, I think it was at the last POCD committee meeting that I attended about aquifer protection. There's been some discussion on the commission over the years. And so we can show the maps that have the different aquifer levels in Woodstock. We don't have the kind of aquifer that they've identified in many other towns, like for instance, in Putnam. And because the state identified that aquifer, they have an aquifer protection agency, which I don't remember if it's also the planning or the zoning, but now I think they've been combined anyway. But I think they function, even if they're the same people, they function as a separate agency and they probably do their reviews whenever something pops up that needs review under that particular statute or ordinance. We don't have that kind of aquifer, but it doesn't mean you can't recognize the aquifer that you do have. So is there anything else you wanted to talk about the need for protection of existing potential public surface to ground drinking water before we move on?
Is it useful later on to look at the aquifers and floodways in the previous P O C D?
Yes.
Got a page and a
and the-
half of discussion about.
The Wetlands Commission has requested that be revised, so they've sent me text that they'd like to
Okay.
review. I didn't bring it with me, but I can email it to everyone.
Really about outlying areas that supplies their. Water supply, and they oversee some of the, you know, the water that, they process, they like roads and lakes, go on. You know, how far up does that extend?
I don't know. I never get much of a response from the WPCA when I've ever contacted them, but maybe I can just walk in and maybe they'll have to talk to me.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing, you know, outline the Willimantic watershed. And the Putnam watersheds.
Just give it a level of, you know, where there's a protection.
Yeah,
So the Wetlands Commission had requested various maps about watersheds. So that's in the works, and you have their minutes, so when we have time, or when you have time, you can read it, and then I can send you by email the stuff they're gonna send to me, and then we can all revisit it after you've had a chance to read it.
Also be helpful to know where the community wells are.
That's one of the maps they've requested. There's some discussion about whether any Woodstock properties are served by public water in Putnam that are right on the border over by their water treatment plant. I don't know, but I've heard rumors that maybe some right on the border might be started by them. But to my knowledge, I didn't think Woodstock had any public water. You just have public sewer, is what I thought.
Yeah, I don't know when the South Campus has its own water supply. That's tested and treated as a community water system. You can. Are there like
38 on the list.
38 community well? How many people in a well is community well? 2 or 4 or 6?
It varies.
I just wondered what the definition of community well is.
I know the village off of Senexit, there's quite a few houses in there.
Yeah.
that are on-
I know if 2 people share a well, is that a community well? Or does it need to be more?
Good question.
I guess the state has some pretty clear definitions.
I'm
on
sure
that.
they do.
I don't know what they are.
So if we don't have anything further on number 3, we move on to number 4. I have some extra of these handouts if you'd like some, that what we're talking about. Same thing I handed out.
Yeah.
When we talk about number 4 and we just multi-family housing rules, so. But I think we covered that. Is there something else there that we want to see?
For cluster development, I took it to mean they were talking about cluster subdivision or conservation subdivisions. And you do allow them already. And also talking about housing, I think the two of those, I think covers that.
Would a development like Cornfield Point that isn't a subdivision, because there one property be a cluster?
Yeah.
Okay, because you said subdivision, but that's not a subdivision, because it's one property.
No, what I meant was, in the subdivision regulations, they do allow for you to have a subdivision where a part of it's open space, and then you put the houses on the rest of it. They sometimes used to be called cluster, and then they moved on to the term of conservation subdivision. We have condo developments, but the current regulations don't allow for them.
So that's what I was asking, because Cornfield Point, it would be like a condo development, because it's one property, it's an HOA, so that's not allowed anymore at all.
Not regs, but there's been a lot of discussion about wanting to change the multifamily, because that would be considered multifamily.
If I can jump in with clarification on the community well. Community well is for 4 or more, but a shared well, which might be useful to make sure we're asking about a shared well, is 2 to 4 households on a shared well versus community well is 4.
Did you say it was horrible?
4 or more.
Okay.
So 1 to 3, so 2 to 3 is a shared well, and 4 or more is community.
Correct.
And are you reading that?
Online, and it was an AI generated response. I did ask for what's behind the community well in Stockton. Well, no, it just in Connecticut.
Which ones are horrible?
That's what you said there.
Can't hear well. I'm not telling you why.
We were on a community well in Tallinn, and there were 19 on that.
Yeah.
So number 5, I gotta work at shared well.
Yeah. Well, the state POCD, that's not the one.
Oh, okay.
The state did their own POCD and they approved it. So as part of the update to the Woodstock POCD, we have to discuss the state POCD. And we have to talk about where we're compatible or, you know, maybe if there's something in there that doesn't work for Woodstock, that sort of thing.
You've read those.
Yeah, yeah.
Got
Mhm.
Seven, physical, social, economic, and governmental conditions and trends. I'm not even sure what they want there.
I think that has to do with the change in your demographics and your local economy. And for government, I wasn't planning on doing a chapter with the title that's in number 7, but those things will be covered in lots of other sections. There'll be a whole section on the government in Woodstock, including the boards and committees. And then we'll have a part about demographics, the population that is changing.
Yep.
In number 8, the needs of the municipality, including but not limited to human resources, education, health, housing, recreation, social services, public utilities, public protection, transportation, and circulation of cultural and international communications. A lot of that will also be covered in the section of the government. But if there's something you wanted to say about that topic now, you could let me know. And then, of course, after you've had time to really read this and think about it, we can bring it up again at the next meeting. So number 9, unless you have further, anything you want to say on number 8?
Can I just back up and need number 7?
Sure.
Hey Chandler, Has the town obtained a real estate appraisal at all within the last year or so? My experience is they often have, these things like social, economic and government conditions and trends. I don't know if the selectmen have an appraisal that we could borrow to look at, see if it includes that kind of stuff.
Yes, I've got one that we did recently.
Okay,
You gotta do.
is that public or do you want to cross out names and addresses and stuff?
Appropriate modification.
And it was done recently?
Month and a half ago.
So 9, the objectives of energy efficient patterns of development, the use of solar and other renewable forms of energy and conservation. I've requested that Kate get me the information on which town properties have solar panels, and I'm not sure how you describe them, because I'm not an electrician or whatever, but like how many watts or whatever. So I'm trying to compare like which properties have them and how much energy is it producing, and then we could talk about, the green team is no longer, green committee.
2012.
They're no longer functioning, but under that topic, we could talk about the same similar things. And the use of large properties for solar panels, we could talk about that. Like there's pros and cons to that. So we could talk about that.
We don't have any, other than town owned, we don't have any large solar arrays in town. We have one coming in.
The study council, we were notified by them. And I don't know when it's gonna be going in. I can reach out to the building commission and say, I'm sure they would need building permits.
Huh? Castle. Castle up, down, across from Salis's. Do we have any idea how much energy is produced just by local people having solar? Then we must have a record of that town, right?
The website says we were the first town to have. I don't remember what it says exactly, but something about being the first town. So I thought the Green Committee had kept track of that sort of stuff at one time. So I don't know what happened to any of that information, and now it's all old. So
Yeah, they last met in March 2012.
I'm not sure how we would know how many other people. Like, people need to get building permits if they're putting solar on their roofs, and if you're doing ground mounted, you need solar. I'm sorry, zoning and solar, but I'm not sure if they can search, if it's in a database or something, we can ask.
I just curious.
The information should be in the permit. Because it should say what size the.
Yeah, it's in the
Right.
permit, but I don't know if that's easily accessible. You can search for that just by
I
solar.
can ask them if they can tell me like how many properties have roof mounted solar versus ground mounted, or whatever other details they might be able to share with us without giving us addresses. That's kind of what we're looking for.
That would just give us like a square footage of panel, that would give us a kilowatt.
Right, or how many properties.
On the
and-
permit, the kilowatts has to go in. So they would give us kilowatts.
So
Just. I won't do it, but it's just interesting though. Number 10, protection and preservation of agriculture. Wetlands mentioned that in theirs, and we've talked about that. That's always a hot topic. So,
And I have the survey that I did with the farms. And I have information on the whole table where it has the change in the farms, like how many farms we've lost and how many new farms. And the sort of diversity of what the farms are doing. So some of the farms have diversified, some of them have scaled back, and how many things that they're doing because they're specializing. So I have the whole table. And number 12, the need for technology infrastructure in the municipality. I don't know if there's any evaluation of how much of your town is accessible for cell phones or for internet. Do you have anything like that?
I know we just finished, getting the broadband, installed here at the town hall, tied to the school. But I'm not sure what.
Can you email me something that I could write about that?
Sure.
I think there's a map online about broadband coverage or something, and it was a very broad map, so I'd have to try to see what I can get out of it just for Woodstock, because it shows the whole state.
Get you all the information.
Okay,
It just happened recently.
with all the cell towers, did they, I'd have to go back to look through, because I'm not sure if they included just their own service, or if they have something about all kinds of cell phones and how much the coverage is around the whole town.
Well, there's two proposals right now in this stuff on,
Right.
Jason wood and up here at this farm. But there is an inventory of what's in town.
So I was gonna write something in about that.
I think the applications that they provided to us, two cell phone companies, did show some coverage maps that included other carriers, and not just theirs.
Is there any other technology that we're gonna need in the future for the town that we could foresee that we need to plan on?
I'm sorry,
Do you know if there's any more, is there any future plans for technology updates for the town and where we are?
not at this point. I don't believe there's anything coming down.
So I don't know if by technology infrastructure, if they include the website, for instance, the town website. I've heard some interest in having some changes made to the GIS that's online. So I'm gonna get some more information about specifically what other things people wanna see on there. But also I've noticed when I was going through the commissions, a lot of the links to minutes are not the right commission or the right meeting. So when you open it, it's, say you're looking at one commission and you open the minutes, it's listed for them. It's not their commission, and it might not even be the date that it's listed on the link. So, that made it kind of hard to look things up when I opened, for instance, I was looking at the agriculture commission. I was looking at their old minutes, and just about every other one of them was for their arboretum committee.
We're looking to.
But the technology also looks like fiber optic is being prepared in town for a lot more coverage with Frontier putting in fiber optic line.
The assessor's been looking into the GIS mapping. There's been serious problems.
So
Who said that?
It sounded like I can't hear that.
So I'm not sure if there's anything else under technology infrastructure. We've talked about broadband, cell towers, fiber optic, the town website, and GIS mapping. So then next, it's under 12, but then it says E1. It's not 13. It's at the bottom of page 2. Such plan of conservation development shall. So these are things you have to do, as opposed to things you only have to consider. So A is be a statement of policies, goals, and standards for the physical and economic development of the municipality. That has a lot to do with land use, so that will factor in there, but if there's anything you think we haven't covered, please let me know. Where throughout the whole plan where it makes sense, I'm gonna add in the input from all the surveys that we've done. 'Cause I think it's important we show that input. I mean, it was important to have it and we need to put it in there. So if there's nothing on that one, we'll move on to B. Provide for a system of principal thoroughfares, parkways, bridges, streets, sidewalks, multi-purpose trails and other public ways as appropriate. So we will have some maps on the roads and the road classification from DOT about, for instance, collector roads versus local roads, and they have a whole bunch of categories on them. So if there's anything you wanted to add about that,
Well, sidewalks come up often, in different conversations, different parts of the town. I guess. Somehow going from the Academy main campus down to Sweet Evelinas or the post office, a little safer way to make that, walking. I know it's along a state highway, so that probably presents its own issue. But this is a conversation or point in the POCD.
You could also get a grade for every road in town from Jason. We pay for that.
okay, what does that mean?
So it'll say like how good of condition it was in. If you want to include that in there. Something the town pays for, you might as well make it a little more easy to access for everybody. I don't remember if they give them an A through F for like a percentage grade, but
So who does the grading?
I don't know the name of the company off the top of my head, but it's someone that we contract through.
So if the road's graded poorly, does that move it up to the priority for the town to do something about it? It's a town road?
Yeah.
And so that's about all the roads or just the town roads?
Just town paved roads.
Anything else anybody wanted to talk about with the roads and transportation system?
Just been kind of curious about, there's two categories of roads that are no longer used. I think they were called abandoned and discontinued. They're still owned by the town and they're public thoroughfares. They might also maybe someday be used as a trail or linear park or something that the public can go for a walk on. I don't know where they are. I don't know what the difference is between those two categories. I think some have been, adjacent property owners have kind of split the difference. And now they're in private ownership. I think the other category, it's still owned by the town. Might be useful to identify those or.
That's defined by state statute. But
Yeah.
the road is discontinued, it automatically goes back to the two abutters.
Kind of split down the middle.
And
So
then
that,
on your other categories, it's all defined by state statute.
so if it reverts to private ownership. It's no longer
It's no longer
open
considered.
to the public to just wander.
Correct. Correct.
But that was discontinued or abandoned?
On abandoned,
Yeah.
and then on discontinued. There's, I don't remember the wording, but it says something about that too.
Alright.
But there is a state statute on that.
I'm pretty sure both of those reverse to the.
Landowners.
Do you happen to remember the state statute?
No, I don't. I don't, I'm sorry. But if you Google it, it comes up.
Detailed letter from one of the previous town attorneys, but all that stuff is thrown out. I don't have it anymore.
I can send you. I can send you.
Not certain, but I think-
On Coleridge where the town was discontinued, it has what state statute.
Yeah.
Since the state law.
I think Northgate is another one.
There's a map called Marvin's Map in the town.
Yeah, it's really cool, man.
He did tons of research and it's numbered and it gives you like a little. There's like all these separate lists. Were done at obviously at different times by different people or something, but it kind of numbers, it gives you some feedback. Sometimes in numbers one and you really don't have a lot of detail about what happened to the road. But sometimes it'll give you a date and then you can go back to the minutes and you can get more information. I've done that on many roads.
Yeah, it's unofficial, but it's really handy. It's cool, man.
Joe, you had,
Yeah, there is a big difference between abandoned and discontinued, is my understanding. If it's officially discontinued by the town, then it reverts half and half to each landowner. But if it's abandoned, I believe the town still owns it. That's what I've been told.
comes up every once in a while, and somebody wants to develop some property.
Right.
Old road. Yes, we've done
So
the
we talked about roads, or is there anything you wanted to say about the other things that are mentioned, the bridges, streets, multi-purpose trails? There's been some discussion about how you have a lot of trails, but they're not always maintained. So if they're not maintained, they probably aren't gonna be used as much, and if the maintenance is very long since it's been done, the trail may not even be visible anymore, and then doesn't even really function as a trail anymore, and if no one uses it, it's sad that it's not gonna be kind of viewed or used as a public resource or a recreation facility.
Do we have many trails in town?
Yes.
Don't go walking on them, so. Where are they? Through like public, the town owned land and,
A lot of them are on land trusts, and then some are on,
Are there any maps or are there at least a list of the properties that
if
have
you go on
trails?
the Woodstock Recreation Department page, there's a hiking trails link that has a list of a lot of them. On where they're located. Not all of them.
There's a fairly new set of trails from the town beach heading out into this fairly long.
There's also many trails like Crucible Park.
The Wyndham Land Trust has a ton of trails in that. It's not very long, but by Snakes Village, there's one too.
So I need you to give me that list, because I can't read that list. So the next page, number 3C, is to be designed to promote with the greatest efficiency and economy, the coordinated development of the municipality and the general welfare and prosperity of its people and identity areas where it is feasible and prudent to have compact transit accessible, pedestrian oriented mixed use development patterns and land reuse to promote such development patterns and land reuse. So we've had some discussions about mixed uses.
yes, yeah.
And so by mixed uses, sometimes people mean putting housing on the same property with the business. So you already allow that with your home occupations, but even larger businesses, we have some that are also have been approved by special permit to be a mixed use. But generally by mixed uses, I think they mean a zone where you allow for the use, and maybe you can allow that as a permitted use, or maybe with a site plan review instead of the whole special permit, because at least right now, the special permit requires a lot of information. And so sometimes that can be off-putting. I'm not saying it's not applicable or not a good idea all the time, just sometimes if there's very little new construction or very little impact, perhaps it would be very reasonable to have a lesser review. And so that was C is kind of a long, it's not a sentence, but a long item. For instance, when it talks about transit accessible, Woodstock is not gonna be the town that's gonna be very transit accessible. But you can make things more pedestrian friendly by where you don't have sidewalks, if you have shoulders that are maintained so that there's a safe place for people to walk or ride their bike. And we know people driving cars are often driving faster as the years go by. So those roads become less safe for pedestrians and bicyclists if people are driving too fast on them all the time. So even if you're not gonna put a sidewalk, we're not gonna have sidewalks throughout Woodstock, obviously. But if you maintain your shoulders, then there's at least a safe place where people can walk and ride a bike. Sometimes some roads are very narrow and that's not always possible to have the pedestrian friendly shoulder on the road, but it's often a good idea to be done.
Does the Northeast Transit District come up into Woodstock or part of Woodstock?
Their regular route doesn't come into Woodstock, but they do have a dial ride service for senior and disabled, and people can call and schedule to be picked up. And their regular route can divert, I think, 3/4 of a mile. And so that might reach a little bit into southern Woodstock.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Would you highlight that kind of comment or accessibility in the report? Maybe
Yes,
to show
I
that
can
it's there, could be expanded.
It's gonna be hard for that service to be expanded because it is so expensive, but if Woodstock wanted to, we may be able to look for more opportunities. For instance, at the PZC committee meeting that we were just at before this, we were talking about, for instance, for seniors, many towns have a van or a bus that is used by the seniors. And so I'm not sure the extent of how often it's used or for what, going on a trip, or maybe they can arrange a way for the town to help seniors use that transportation to get to certain regular things like appointments, or maybe they take people on shopping. I'm not sure how other towns use their senior vans, but they are something that exists in many towns.
And we do something like that. We have a vehicle, an SUV. And we have a part-time driver that brings people to their medical appointments that are kind of shut in, don't have transportation, or they don't drive anymore. And
And
then,
is that, you mean the town where you work?
yeah, and then we have what we call a senior bus, which is just a regular bus. And they do have different, out to lunch things and other things during the summertime. So.
Some of the towns can apply for a grant that often goes through NECOG to purchase a bus, or sometimes if NECOG has old buses that sometimes they've sold them to towns for a very reasonable price that are then used for those purposes. The transit district has certain laws they have to follow, so I think after a certain number of miles or certain years, they're not allowed to use their buses or vans anymore, even though they may still be perfectly functional.
If it's leased from the transit, yeah, they have a lifespan on it, and then you can actually buy it from them for like $1. But there are quarterly inspections that need to be done. It requires you to measure the brake pads and do certain things, measure the tread depths, and motor vehicles will come in and check all your records to make sure they're in order. And certain ones, I think it's like every year, you actually have to take the bus down. And you actually need somebody with a passenger endorsement, even though there's nobody on the bus except for the driver. And it has to go down to DMV, and they actually do a thorough inspection on it.
That's what
It's a
you do.
lot. It's very costly.
Is that for any town that has one of these senior buses?
Yeah, if they're doing it right, they're doing it right. But, if, you gotta manage the risk. So if you're not doing that, and that bus gets in an accident, it could be a serious violation. Especially the driver. Because they're supposed to be aware of that, and they're supposed to be carrying all those credentials on the bus at the same time.
So is there anything else they wanted to talk about? Like, for instance, the mixed use development or that sort of thing?
We talked about mixed use before, and it's in there for us to. That's one of the topics that we have to work on.
Right, so this statute is for the whole state, so when it says something like compact type of development, I would argue that every town can't be the same everywhere, and you can't, there's always a trade-off. Like Woodstock's gonna have the open space and the farmland, and that's where I basically think of it as like the lungs and the liver for your state. So you sort of are supporting the more developed areas because their watershed relies on you. So you can't have everything be built up to a downtown level of density because wherever they get all the stuff they need, the fresh air and the water, and of course, waste disposal, some of that stuff is gonna end up going somewhere. And so this is a general list for the whole state, but Woodstock can't be everything to everyone, including you can't be the walkable, dense community that downtown Putnam might be viewed at, or certainly is a bigger place far west of here, or Hartford, and all those bigger communities.
Is it worth including in the POCD, just a commentary about a place like Senexit Village? Which is pretty walkable, there's a convenience store nearby. Maybe the transit district actually approaches that. So although it may not fulfill all of the description here. In the POCD, it can say, you know, given the wide land area, Woodstock, at least there's a certain section that
In some ways, I would say the South Woodstock can fulfill some of those
some of those, okay,
in a small town way.
okay.
So the next one is recommend the most desirable use of land within the municipality for residential, recreational, commercial, industrial, conservation, agricultural, and other purposes, include a map showing such proposed land uses. So I don't think any of your past POCDs have had anything like that. So, I don't know if you're supposed to be doing this, but I don't know how far you want to get into it.
We have our, our little industrial park and mostly agricultural and residential, and we only have one zone. With the exception of the
Really, the Lake District.
lake districts, but I mean, that's,
What our
Doesn't-
town
that's,
is
you know, I mean-
probably well mapped out, and consider. Lakes, ponds, wetlands areas, PDRs, existing agriculture, I mean, it's already kind of,
it's already blocked out.
right, so, who's gonna,
It's another bigger town thing.
So of the list, residential, recreational, conservation, and agricultural, most of the town is already very well suited for that and already put to those uses. We have limited areas for industrial and very small scale commercial. And considering your traffic counts and we're not near 395, you're not in the corridor for the state, you're not gonna be on anybody's map to do anything big in a large scale for commercial or industrial. So you kind of already have those things, you just haven't made the recommendation. So if that's what you wanted to recommend, like similar pattern, then that would be what you'd recommend.
Kind of continue what we're doing.
The next one is recommend the most desirable density of population in several parts of the municipality. I'm not sure if you
That's
foresee
big.
any difference in density. You have the lake districts, which are very small lots, so they have much higher density than the rest of the town. I'm not sure if we see that changing.
This is written for a town that's gonna have apartment buildings in the downtown or more areas. It's not written for a rural town.
Well, desirable density, it doesn't,
Okay, I know.
density,
For
could be low
several parts
density,
of
can be
town,
high
just-
density.
Yeah, I know, but in several parts of town, it's pretty vague. So. Just. I wonder sometimes if people write these recommendations.
Well, I suppose it could be hard to try to write something that's, they think is one version that covers the whole state. I personally don't think it should be done that way. I think it should be done kind of like tiered. You recognize the highly urban areas and you have recommendations on those. And then as you go down and you end up with a small rural town, I would think you should have a different kind of recommendation. To have one set of recommendations for everybody's little ridiculous. I think it provides very little guidance. So the next one is F, note any inconsistencies with the following growth management principles. So the first one they mentioned is redevelopment and revitalization of commercial centers and areas of mixed land uses with existing or planned physical infrastructure. Someone might say we don't have commercial centers, but we do have properties that have been put to other uses, and you could recommend reuse of those. Perhaps as more favorable to reuse them as opposed to redeveloping, or sorry, to developing raw land. Like if you know, you have Rogers and Line Master and the businesses over in the industrial park, if something were to change, they were to close or be bought by someone new, would you want them to be reused first before you take a big swath of land that's currently wooded or farmland and then plunk a new factory over there? So that's, in a town like Woodstock, I think that's what that would be talking about. It'd be a different conversation if you're talking about that growth management principle and you're talking about Hartford or somewhere else. But redeveloping your brownfields, cleaning them up and then reusing them allows you to keep your land that's functioning as your watershed and your habitat and your farmland as what they already are. So if there's no discussion, we can move on. Expansion of housing opportunities and design choices to accommodate a variety of household types and needs.
Discuss that.
So that's in the process. We've already discussed wanting to make recommendations on those topics.
We have talked about making recommendations to
Right.
adapt our zoning rules to make it more friendly to like duplexes and maybe some multi-family housing. A lot of this stuff seems to be pretty redundant. I mean, I know it's what they came up with, but it's, you know, small town, small rural town, and a lot of the stuff just doesn't really apply to us. So we just have to go through and write our report.
So for 3, concentration of development around transportation nodes and along major transportation corridors to support the viability of transportation options and land reuse. The bulk of that wouldn't apply, but I might bring you back to the discussion we've had about maybe on state roads. Maybe that's where you want to encourage development. I'm not saying you want to, I'm not trying to say bring more development to Woodstock. I'm talking about the stuff that would already be proposed here. If you're having someone wanting to open a business and they have to get a special permit, do they open it on a dirt road? That's a narrow road that everyone's going to be concerned about high levels of traffic? Or do you encourage them to go on a state road where the roads are already paved, they're already very wide, the traffics are already higher? That's where you might encourage that. So that's kind of in a small town concept following that policy, I think, or that principle. So what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, we've discussed that in previous, I mean, that's already we've discussed that several times over. So I mean, that's just kind of, some of these we can just kind of check off and say, yeah, we're working on that.
We did include the possible cannabis retail. Had to be on a state road. So that's new in the last 10 years.
Joey, you all set?
Yeah.
My concern with focusing development on, say, the state highways in town, is that we're gonna evolve into a Route 6 through Brooklyn, Route 44, east of 395 in Putnam, if we zone it for those kind of uses, I think we're gonna attract them. And this kind of car-dependent strip development along highways. It just doesn't appeal to me, and I really don't wanna see Woodstock go in that direction.
You still have your, regulations you have on the maximum size. And those kind of things, I wasn't saying you needed to throw those out the window. But right now, I remember we had a discussion where this, for a special permit of a business that would go on the end of a dead end dirt road. There was a lot of discussion about how certain people felt that that was the wrong place to put it. And then every time we have a discussion about a subdivision on a dirt road or a new business, this comes up. So the alternative would be to encourage it to go on roads that are not those roads. I'm not saying welcome Route 6 development here. I'm saying perhaps not encouraging your higher traffic development to go on the dirt roads.
That document or approach or theory that you brought out before, get the term, the scale,
The tiered approach.
some other, I don't know if that's kind of like an in-between approach, I can't quite recall the term of it, but it's something you brought up a few months ago as an example of something we might want to consider.
If you can remember what it was and email me. Talk about so many things.
It had to do with like the scale of buildings and how they're arranged and I guess the town, someone's deciding on like density and I don't want to say architecture, because it didn't dictate what buildings look like, but I think it was more like density, height,
The form-based zone.
form-based, that's it.
That's kind of along the lines of what I was saying, that if you have a new development, but you have very little impact. Maybe you don't have to require the same review and you don't have to require all the same things in your permitting that you would if you were having a new development that involves paving and new building and new construction and clearing trees and because that's a lot more impact on the environment, it's a lot more concern for water quality and drainage, all that sort of stuff. But if you're reusing a building and maybe the only things that are really changing are what's on the inside of the building. And if the outside, the parking lot's not changing, you know, maybe they need like 2 dumpsters as opposed to 1. It's not a big change on the outside.
Were you thinking of the middle housing? That was the term she was using.
I think it was form-based housing.
Okay.
But form-based zoning is more about, you look at, instead of having endless standards on how you do something, it's more about. So instead of having, you have a rule where this business, say retail, has to do this, and this business, restaurant has to do that. It's more about the building and the parking and not so much about what happens on the inside of it.
So that almost addresses first, number 1 under F, redevelopment and revitalization. Allowing for an easier path for one business to take over where a prior business was, it's very similar and whatever criteria we come up with.
Yes, conservation and restoration of the natural environment, cultural and historic resources and existing farmlands. So we will have sections in the POCD about conservation, open space, farmland. Jean Pillow has generously offered to do a natural resource inventory. She talked about that at the last meeting, the POCD committee meeting that was just before this meeting tonight. So there will be a lot of pages or text devoted to that. Your historic properties commission, I guess, is no longer functioning. So, but that's an opportunity if it was revitalized, maybe they could help along those lines. Something else we spoke about at the POCD committee meeting earlier tonight was that if your zoning allows for reuse of buildings, maybe you can see older buildings maintained and put to some other use. And then if there's multiple uses in them or just a different use, maybe we can keep them. Because if they're only allowed to be houses, but they're so large, they're gonna be perhaps more expensive and need a lot more maintenance, because if they're that old, perhaps they have some sort of issue due to the age of the building. And if it's only allowed to have one family live in it, that could be very costly, and maybe there will be fewer families who can afford to do that. But if you allow this to be reused, the business might wanna go into a building like that, and then maybe they would keep the outside of it the same. You used to have something in your zoning regs that, like, said that you had to have X, Y, and Z for a special permit, but then it had an allowance if your building was too small, or something about the building was too close to the road, or something about it being non-conforming to that standard, you could still get a special permit there. It was in the old regs, I'd have to look it up, but that kind of seemed a little more encouraging to reuse of old buildings than requiring everybody to get a special permit. It's very expensive with your E2 survey and all the other stuff, especially if not a lot's changing on the outside. Last,
So I think one end of the spectrum of mixed use is primarily a residential structure, which allows some sort of business to occupy it as well. The other end, I almost saw that happening at that gas station in West Woodstock. That was primarily a commercial building. But as you remember out back at the lower level, which had a walkout, it had some kind of room down there, which I thought initially at some point that was going to be an apartment. So I thought that'd be kind of interesting, and maybe we should consider those situations where, again, the primary function is commercial, but it has a small residential component. It could just be a 1 or 2 bedroom unit, or either the owner or rent out on the market.
right now, your home occupation, basically your home has to be larger than your business. And if you don't meet that, then you need the special permit. So from understanding you correctly, you're open to the business being larger than the residential use, and it doesn't have to be lived in by the owner.
Yeah, just kind of throwing it out there for us to at some point, or keep that in the back of our heads if we're providing some guidance through this plan on mixed use.
Not that it's gonna happen in Woodstock, but I see a huge missed opportunity when you visit other towns and you see these, what looks like large buildings. But you all know the space in the upstairs is all vacant, it's all fake. Well, that, you could make like a double use of that development on the land if you allowed for something above. So their last growth management principle is protection of environmental assets critical to public health and safety. Well, I guess not the last one, I just didn't format it right, but, so that one, that's kind of plays right into exactly what I was saying about how Woodstock serves as the watershed and the farmland and for the fresh air and the fresh water, because you have land that's not developed. Now, a town, I was on the POCD update committee in Putnam years ago, because I live in Putnam, and I remember someone saying they wanted more open space by Walmart, and they thought, well, if there's no land undeveloped by Walmart, you can't get open space by Walmart. But over on Kennedy Drive, that's where their aquifer is. That's what they're supposed to be protecting for their aquifer. So I remember saying, well, that's where you should be protecting. You need to protect it where it exists. You can't stretch the boundaries and somehow manufacture open space when all the land's been developed. So I was so frustrated at that meeting when someone would say they want open space over by Walmart when there's doesn't seem to be any undeveloped land. But then where the aquifer is, you have undeveloped land, that's what you should be protecting. And they allowed a crematorium to go in, which specifically in the state statute was not allowed to have crematoriums on aquifers. So it's very frustrating, but that's my point about how Woodstock is gonna serve a different role in your state than another town that has all the walkable and sidewalks and the businesses and all the services. They're both important, but you're gonna serve different roles.
And is that a commentary you plan to include in the P O C D?
Yes, and
Okay,
I put those in all the affordable housing plans that I've written.
yeah.
Like when the state, you hear all this talk from the state about how they wanna push for more housing everywhere. I'm for more affordable and attainable housing too, but you can't just shove it everywhere. Of course, it doesn't make it affordable if you put it in the far edges of town and you need a car and there's no jobs and you can't walk to anything. It's a different discussion, but same concept. So I think their actual last growth management principle is integration of planning across all levels of government to address issues on a local, regional, and statewide basis. So I kind of wanted to cover that in the section on government and with the commissions. You do have quite a few commissions that are kind of tasked with something that's very related, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of coordination amongst what they're doing. That's a huge missed opportunity. With your wetlands commission, your planning and zoning, your conservation, your open space land acquisition. If you talk to each other more frequently and understood what each other's doing, maybe you could achieve more results.
So G and H, we already have in there.
Yes, G is make provision for development of housing opportunities. We talked about that. And H is promote housing choice and economic diversity in housing, including for both low income and moderate income households. So we've talked about, we have our affordable housing plan, and then we've talked about changing the regulations for multifamily. So I think we've covered that. For the next page, we have, I consider allowing older adults and persons with a disability the ability to live in their homes with communities whenever possible. So I don't think there's anything like prohibiting that, but there may be things that are making that difficult. For instance, if there's very little housing opportunities for people to move into when they want to downsize, then they may have to move out of town. They cannot afford or physically can't manage to live in their home anymore because maybe there's too many stairs or needs a lot of maintenance work or something. So if there's no opportunities for them to stay in town by moving to a more suitable house, that's something you could encourage by making recommendations to change your zoning for what kind of housing you allow. In the next one, it says permit home sharing in single family zones between up to 4 adult persons of any age with a disability or who are 60 years of age or older, whether or not related to receive supportive services in the home. Woodstock doesn't regulate the size of a family or how people are related who live in a home. So I think it's kind of a moot point. And the next one is allow accessory apartments for persons with a disability or persons 60 years of age or older or their caregivers. We already do that. We already allow for temporary healthcare structures, is that I think we called it. And you allow for accessory apartments, and we're talking about changing the regulations for housing. The next one is expand the definition of family in single family zones to allow for accessory apartments for persons 60 years of age or older, persons with a disability or their caregivers. In preparing such plan, the commission shall consider focusing development and revitalization in areas with existing or planned physical infrastructure. We have no regulations about age, and there's no requirement that anyone who lives in the accessory apartment have any sort of relationship with whoever lives in the primary home. So I think we should leave it that way. And then the next part, I don't think it's applicable to Woodstock at all. It says for any municipality that is contiguous to Long Island Sound, so that's why I crossed it all out. So page 5, you go underneath the red strikeout. Any municipal plan of conservation is developed and scheduled for adoption on or after July 1st of 2015 shall identify the general location and extent of any of these three things: areas served by existing sewage systems, areas where sewage systems are planned, and areas where sewers are to be avoided. So we haven't talked about that in great detail. We did have some discussion. We invited Steve Morse to come talk to us. Woodstock has a sewer avoidance policy, so that's pretty clear. I don't know if there's any interest in changing that in the future, but, and I know it would be difficult. We talked about all the challenges would be involved in that.
Yeah, and that's just. You're gonna identify that as how we're doing it now. I don't foresee that changing. I don't think WPCA has any plans on changing that.
It would be a challenge because you do have the limit of your contracts. Putnam, I'm sure, has a limit in how much waste they can take. They have waste from Putnam, they take in as a commercial customer, Woodstock and now Comfort. So they must have a limit on what they can take. And I don't know how close it is to that limit, but you have a limit in Woodstock and the volume that you can force through your pipes. You can't just add more and just assume the pipes are just flow faster. Like there are certain limits and it's not gonna be easily resolved, but I'm not saying it's impossible. If the state comes through with their fair share of housing, depending on the outcome, you may be required to make some changes, but you should address that when it happens.
Okay.
And then the bottom of page 5, a plan of conservation and development or any part thereof or amendment thereto prepared by the commission or a special committee. It goes on to the process of how you finish it up.
That's just all hearings and.
Yeah.
that we have to do.
So when you have time to go through this and you have any more comments or thoughts, you can email them to me or we can have a section on the next meeting. If we have any like applications, you could, after you talk about that stuff, you can bring this up again. And also you can talk about that community action plan. The community development action plan, they can, I don't know if you want to go over that tonight, or if you want to just read it and then we can just talk about it at the next meeting.
Let's get everybody look it over and talk about it next week. Anything else at your meeting earlier today, Joseph, that you wanted to share with us?
Well, one of the things that was brought up at length was a discussion of the open space that we have in town. And try to get the Conservation Commission, Ag Commission, Wetland Commission, and Land Trust together so that we can combine all their maps together so we know the open space and have that included in the POCD. So it really needs a coordinator to do all of that. And what's her name? Halo? Jean's doing a lot of that, but can't do it alone. And then Bill's helping out with her. But, you know, you also need the land trusts and the Ag Commission.
There's maps around with all the different, I've seen for the town, have all the. You know, the land that's in, you know, the state programs, farmland program and all the land trust land.
So
There-
currently, right now, open space, they're allocated with it, so they have a map, they know it's not up to date. The Ag Commission is now spending money on creating an open space map, but not talking to the Open Space Commission. And the Conservation Commission also has an open space map, so there's 3 different commissions doing the same thing, but not together.
I have reached, because I need that for the open space map in the POCD, so I have reached out. And I'm trying to get all of that stuff together to make sure I'm not duplicating. But yeah, if the town's gonna have someone work on something like that, it might make more sense if you all work together.
So that open space map, was done, it'll be 6 years in September, hasn't been updated since. The same one, and
I didn't get a chance to see what you emailed me,
yeah,
but we did one for the 2015 POCD. And the Ag Commission has an open space list from 2011.
Alright.
And I don't know which one the Conservation Commission is using and how old that one is. But I also got one from the Last Green Valley, because they have one for all their towns. And so I'm trying to figure out what's missing and put it all together into one list.
And then there was a discussion on the need for a community center for the town. You know, looking down the road, and either a community center or a senior center, or combine the 2. Housing, of course, is always a big topic. And education too. With our declining enrollment of kids in the school. You know, are we gonna be able to support the elementary school system without combining with another town? Just a thought, yeah.
So that's kind of all I had for tonight's discussion.
Okay, well, we can digest all that. If anybody has any comments, email them to Delia. We have any other input on PLCD? Okay. Hearing none, I didn't see a report from Dan.
If you didn't leave one in all those handouts over there.
I didn't see anything. Um, Catch up next time. Any citizens' comments? Hearing none, I didn't have any communications. I did sign that Mylar, and there's a bill I have to sign. Oh, I've sent all sheets. No, I did not. Oh, okay, I may have to come do that tomorrow. Or
We'll let them know that you need more time.
Okay.
Because you don't want to file, it has to be signed all of them.
So now we have an executive session.
Let me,
Yeah, I'm just, because we need a motion to move in, we want to invite the selectmen. And John, is John here, John discussed.
so Cameron, just want to let you know, I'm gonna be leaving because they're gonna go into executive session.
Yep, sounds good. I'll also leave.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? So moved. All in favor?
Aye.
So now we'll give a few minutes for everybody to get squared away. And I have to stop.
I'd like to make a motion that we move out of the executive session.
We have second. All in favor?
Aye.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Very productive meeting. Yeah.